So my wife and I used some of the time during the quarantine to extend our patio a little bit, and as part of that project, we decided to put in a pergola. And so I wanted to create a quick video to show you how we did it. So we started the project by digging up the patio and pouring the concrete. And when we did that, we put in these 6x6 by 10 posts. I don't have a video of us putting the posts in, but that's pretty straightforward. So for this video, just imagine the posts are in and the rest of the pergola is ready to be built. Alright, so now that the pergola posts are in, the next step is to put on the regular beams. And these are the beams that are going to be running lengthwise across the pergola. So the beams usually have a decorative end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create this template that then I can use to draw on the beams so I can have very easily reproducible cuts. So you can Google online, there's plenty of templates that are already available, or if you're looking for inspiration. I'm not going to go with anything fancy here. For mine, I'm just going to maybe start a couple inches down, like here, and then just kind of bring it in on a little slope. Now, one thing that I would like to point out is that the shape of the template should match the shape of your beam. So, for example, the beams that I'm using are 9" by 16 feet. And so the width of this sheet is 9 inches. So I can lay it down on the wood and then simply draw a line. Then I can cut. Now there's like some really fancy ones where they're like the curves and stuff like this. For me, for this project, I'm just keeping it simple. I'm just drawing a straight line, so I can just go with my circular saw and cut it across, and so I don't have to whip out my jigsaw and try to get intricate. Now on my pergola, I'm only going to have this decorative end on one end of a pergola. On the far end that goes into the little wooded area, nobody's really going to see that, so I'm just going to cut it across over here and just cut them like that. So now what I will do is I will grab my knife and I will cut this out. Alright, so this is our mold from the previous step. So we're going to do two things. We're going to, first of all, I don't like this edging over here. I don't want that to show because it's kind of ugly looking. And then we're going to mark this and we're going to make the cut and also cut this off as well. So we're going to take 1/2 inch off from each side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to align this template next to the top side of the board. I'm going to draw this line out. And that's going to be my cut line. And after I'm done with this line, I'm going to come back. I'm going to take off 1/2 inch over here. So I'm going to just mark it 1/2 inch. So this is pretty straightforward over here. Just got my circular saw and I'm making these cuts. And then I'm going to repeat these cuts on all 4 beams. Alright, so I've cut all the beams and I've stacked them up and put them up sideways. So now they're standing on the bottom, so this is kind of how they will go in the pergola. Furthermore, I've went through and I marked here on this beam where the posts will be. So I have one here and I have one on this side as well. Then I was able to measure the distance between my posts, and so now I'm putting in markings that I'm going to cut for the actual rafters. So you can see here that I'm going to cut this through. My rafters are 6 inch wide, so I'll probably cut this down to about 3 inches. and then so the rafters will go right in here and they'll stick out by about 3 inches. So in order to get this accurately, what I have is this whole setup. So it's about 15 inches in how far I'm putting the rafters apart, and I'm using this to measure the width of the rafters, which is just one of the scrap pieces that came off from doing this. So what I'm doing is I'll put this piece right here, and then I'll draw these lines like this so that I know where to cut. And then I take my spacer block and I put it on the other side of this, and then I come back over here and draw this other line here, and just rinse and repeat. Now that this side is done, I'm going to go ahead and move this down to the next position, and so I'm going to go through and I'm going to do the entire beam, and after this I will be ready to cut incisions for my rafters. Alright, so after you cut the slices with a circular saw, you could use something like your axe and a chisel to hollow it out. So here's what I did for my slats. So stick a hammer in there, stick my axe in there, and I just turn it like this, and then they'll all come out. And then do it from the other side. And then you can just like pluck them out. Throw them away somewhere. And then this area you can just come back with a chisel and finish it up. And again, it doesn't have to be perfectly smooth. We're talking about a pergola here. And you can use a sample piece of wood to test the thickness, make sure it goes in there fine, and we're done. So this is what the beams look like when I was done with them. Nothing special here. One thing I would like to point out is that I did this in my driveway, and cleaning up all the sawdust was very painful. So after creating the beams, the next step is installing them on the posts. To install them, I had to create these slots on each post where the beams would go. And so what I did is I measured 7.5 feet from the bottom on one of the posts, and then it will be the bottom of where the beam would be. Then I measured the top part and drew 2 lines on each post. So once you have the bottom and the top line drawn, it's time to create that slot for the beam. So what I did is I set my circular saw height to the depth, to the same depth as the beams that will be running across, and then I made the first 2 cuts. Right, so the top one and the bottom one, I made them using my speed square, and then everything in the middle I kind of hollowed out the same way that I hollowed out the slots on the beams. Right, so you just run your circular saw through, and then you finish hollowing it out with your chisel and your axe. Once the area was hollowed out and cleaned, I used my sawzall to chop off the top of the posts, and I started installing the beams. So this is tricky. Definitely get a helper for this part because they're heavy and it's easy to get hurt. Initially, I had them just clamped down using my wood clamps, down to the post so that I can arrange them and make adjustments as needed. And then I put a couple 3-inch screws through them into the post until I get the bolts in. Alright, so here's an update on the pergola. I got all the beams mounted. Right now they're just screwed into the post. You can see here that there's still a little bit of a post in between them. I've evened this out, and so the rafters that are going sideways are just there to kind of make sure things are even and leveled, and I'm going to take them down so I can trim the edges off, make it look a little bit better, and then put them back. One problem I ran into is that I don't have a drill bit, so I have 1/2-inch screws, 1/2-inch bolts that I was going to mount the beams through, So I was gonna put 2 in each post, just to kind of tighten this up. And I realized that my 1/2 inch bit is not long enough to go through both the beams and what's left of the post. So I'm gonna run to Home Depot real quick and pick one up. I also need an additional 4 rafters that I didn't calculate properly, so I'm gonna pick that up and yeah, hopefully get most of this done today. Now, one thing that really screwed me up here on this one is that I was doing some research online, and it looks like you can't actually paint pressure treated wood right when you get it. So when you get it, it's kind of wet because it has all the chemicals that they add to it. And all the research I read online say, you gotta wait at least a few months to paint it. So initially we were planning to paint it before we put all the beams up, but I guess it's just not gonna work out that way. So we're gonna just build this pergola out and then let it sit there for a few months and then come back later. All right, so this is the end of technically day 1. Took me all day to put these beams up. I started the day with making the slots for them on the posts that are sticking out. That pretty much took me the whole morning to carve these out, and then it took a while to put the beams up. I initially had them supported by just one 3-inch screw and some of my, I forgot the word now, too tired, some of my clamps. And so then I ended up running 1/2-inch galvanized bolts through them. I got a washer on each side, and the nut is on the inside of the pergola. Now I did run into a problem here because these are 6x6 posts, and I only have this kind of drill bit for drilling 1/2-inch holes. And so what happened is that this drill bit would not go all the way through the beams in the post, and so there's still like a good chunk of the second post that was left over. So I ran to Home Depot and I saw what they had for this, and they didn't have one that I could mount into my drill and drill that deep. So what I ended up doing is so I would drill 2 holes in each, let's say in each post, as deep as this would let me. Then I would flip out my drill bit into one of these ones. So this is the smallest one that they had. It cost me like $7. So I take this drill bit out, I put this one in, and then I try to get it right in the center of the hole, and I drill through all the way through. Then I come around on the other side, and then I put this drill bit back on, and I'll just drill in the rest of the hole from the other side and just try to keep it as centered as possible. So that worked out really well for me. I didn't run into any problems. I guess some folks who might be a little bit more better at this stuff, they could probably figure out exactly where the hole needs to be on the other side, but I don't want to risk it, because if I make a mistake there, if it's larger than the washer, then I would run into problems, right? So just try to err on the side of caution. And one of the things that I did also is, the rafters that are going to be running across this, I was testing this as I went through, right? So after I put the beams up, before I put the bolts in and before they were fully screwed in, I made sure that I could run my rafters across. I tested to make sure they're at the proper angle, and then they fit both of the posts, both of the beams on each side. And so that looks pretty good for me. So that's it for me for today. Next day is I'm gonna pull this rafter down and do some kind of maybe something a little bit more elaborate than this, than what I did for the beams. So decorate the ends a little bit, and then I'll start putting them up. Now, one of the things I also noticed today is that the third course that I'll need to put on top of these are actually going to need to be at least 14 feet long. And I didn't really count on running really, really long beams in the third course. So that's going to be the smallest one. So I'm thinking maybe like 1 inch by 1 inch. and I mean, they don't sell that kind of dimension at Home Depot or Lowe's. So what I'll probably end up doing is just getting smaller wood and just ripping it, and then joining it somewhere up top, over one of these rafters so that you can't see it. All right, so the next step is I got the rafters are gonna go across. My wife wanted a little bit of a fancier pattern, so I ended up making a curved pattern, and I cut it out with my jigsaw. Now, wife promised that she will sand these down, so I'm just gonna leave it as is. Then, after all the rafters were sanded down, we went ahead and put them up. This step was pretty straightforward. All right, so this is the view from the back of a pergola, and you can see I made one boo-boo here when I was measuring where the rafters are going to go in the beams, and this end part looks kind of bare, right? And so it doesn't look very good. So what we've decided to do is to add another rafter here at the end, and it's just going to sit on top of the ends of these posts. So instead of creating a hole or creating a groove inside the beam, we're just gonna hollow out the rafter and then just put it on top and then mount it together with a bracket. So here's the new beam that we have, and I'm gonna mount it up right now. So this step was pretty straightforward, and make the slots on the beams wider if you have to fit them in. I had to make a couple adjustments. Once they're in, we measured to make sure that they're kind of aligned and equal from each side, and then we used some metal brackets and exterior screws to mount them in. So the length of the pergola is about 14 feet, and so they didn't have wood at Lowe's that I could use for Purlin. Ideally, I would need something that's like 1 inch by 1 inch, that's 14 feet long. So what I ended up doing is I got about 20 2x4s that were 8 feet long, and then I trimmed the edges, and then I just ripped them in half and cut the tail. After the purlin was cut and sanded and generally ready to go, it was time to nail it up to the pergola. So this part is kind of scary, right? So when you get up there, you're walking on the rafters, and I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit scared when I first got up there. I think the key is to get like a larger board up there that you can confidently walk on, at least until you get some purlin installed. Once you already have, maybe a foot of purlin installed, then you can just walk on that, and you can be much more confident in, your step. Make sure you don't fall through. So here I had my nail gun with an air compressor down below. My wife was passing me all the purlin, and then I was basically arranging it. So because I had all the purlin ripped in half, so basically each 2x4 yielded me, a little slightly longer than a 14-foot, length. So it was able to go the entire length of the pergola and then some. And so, nothing much to this step. Just be careful if you try this. Take it easy and take it slow, and definitely get somebody who can help pass the purlin up to the top. So this step took us maybe about 2 or 3 hours to get this. One thing that I also like to mention is get a relatively long spacer block that you can use. In our case, we used about a 2x4, or it was like a piece of plywood or something that was just the right length. And so use that to space out the purlin and make sure that all your spacing is even. And then you're done, and you can start enjoying the pergola the same night. Just string up some lights, put up a hammock, put in some patio furniture, and you're ready to bring out the kiddos and enjoy some time outside. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you tried this, go ahead and be safe. Take it slow. If you have any questions, just hit up the comments. Thank you.